Welcome to the Healers Café, the number one show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. Welcome to the Healers Cafe. And today I have with me Frank King. He's done several TEDx talks, and just to know what it's about, it's a suicide. He's a suicide prevention speaker and a comedian for 39 years. Now, um, how do those two fit together? I guess we're going to find out. But I was thinking, oh, this will be an interesting discussion. So, thank you for accepting to have this discussion. And well, why don't we just start? What happened, or how did it start, or how did you become a comedian, or why did you go into suicide prevention? Like, let's start whichever part you feel like answering first.
Yes, therein lies a tale, as my mother would say. Uh,
Sure.
in fourth grade, and I feel very fortunate this happened. In fourth grade, I told my first joke. The kids laughed. The teacher was hysterical. She had to excuse herself to go to the teacher's lounge. She was laughing so hard. And at that moment, at 9 years old, I thought, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
at nine, not a doctor,
Yeah.
not a firefighter, a comedian. Um, and then 12th grade, I had taken drama all 3 years of high school. In the US at the time, high school was 3 years, and never got a speaking role in any of the school plays.
Mm.
And I thought, well, there's a talent show in the spring. If I do stand up, I can write, direct, produce, and star in my own show. So I did. Nobody had ever done stand up at the talent show. And I won. Of course, I beat the accordion player and the folk dancer, so it wasn't a real tough victory, but still. I told my mom I'm going to LA to be a comedian. And she was big on education. And she said, "No, son, you're going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. Hell, you can be a goat herder for all I care. But you're going to be a goat herder with a college degree." So I went to UNC Chapel Hill and got 2 college degrees and then bolted for the West Coast. And on April Fool's Day, not by accident, 1984, back in the 1900s, I did my first open mic. And halfway through my set, I heard a voice inside my head say simply, "You're home." So at that
Mm.
moment, I decided I for real was going to
Wow.
do it for a living. Now, I had no idea how. I've threatened to write a keynote since then called "What Could You Do If You Didn't Know No Better?" Because I had no idea how hard it was. 18 months later, December of 84, I said to my wife of 38 years, was my girlfriend at the time, "I'm going on the road, be a comedian. You want to come along for the ride?" Figuring she'd go, "Oh, hell no." She goes, "Yeah." So we gave up the apartment and our jobs. And
Wow.
when I gave up my job, there's a guy named Bill who saw me and standing by the door as I walked out. And he knew what I was up to. He knew I was going to be a stand-up comic. And he said, "You'll be back." That was 39 years ago. I hope he's not waiting. Uh, so we went on the road, 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop, 7 years and change.
Oh my goodness.
hmm And worked with people who are famous now. Jim Carrey, Canadian.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, there was Mike McDonald, sadly deceased, but also Canadian, very funny. And Seinfeld, Jeff Foxworthy, Ellen, Rosie, Adam
Mm.
Sandler, Kevin James, Steve Harvey, back just when they were comics. And then did a little radio back in my hometown. I got hired to be a DJ, morning show. In the mid 90s, they were hiring comics to be sidekicks. And
Right.
that lasted 18 months because there are two kinds of people in radio, ones who've been fired, ones who are going to be fired. So, and my boss said after he fired me, and we're still friends. I mean, the show never really gelled, so I don't hold it against him. He said, "Go back on the road." Well, the comedy boom had busted. However, I was a clean act, so I thought I'll do corporate comedy. I'll do comedy at conventions, the rubber chicken circuit. So I did that until the last recession, the world financial collapse in
Mhm.
2008, 9, 10. And we lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally.
Mm, mm,
Uh, the audience should know, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger, which is the first laugh I get in my keynote. I go, it's okay to laugh. That was a point. They call it comic relief for a reason. And last year, a friend of mine was at a keynote and he thought he'd be funny. He came up afterwards. He goes, hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I said, hey, man, could you try to sound, I don't know, slightly less disappointed? That's where the funny is in the topic. So when conferences came back, 2011-ish,
mhm,
meeting planner, more than one meeting planner, Speakers Bureau said to me, Frank, look, we love you, but we can't pay you 5 grand just to be funny anymore. You've got to teach the audience something. And I always wanted to make
mhm,
a living and a difference. I always wanted to teach. I just had no idea.
mhm,
What have I got to teach? So a friend of mine, and listen up if you're an aspiring speaker, a friend of mine,
mhm,
Judy Carter, wrote a book called The Message of You. Turn your life into a money-making speaking career.
mhm.
She gave me a copy. She said, Frank, look, you're smart. You read it, you'll figure it out. And I went into it thinking I got nothing. And halfway through, she takes you by the hand to find your heart story, the one you can't help but tell, the one that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So I got a cat here. What's up? Come on, baby. We have 6 rescue kitty cats. Oh, so you may see more than one before this is Lily. Hi, Lily.
Wow.
Uh, so I halfway through the book, I,
Uh,
I do have something to talk about. Judy led me right to it. I thought, given my 2 mental illnesses, near suicide attempt, suicide loss survivor, more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd, I could speak on suicide prevention if I got some training. So I did.
right.
Got a couple of certifications. And then my second thought was, now, wait a minute. I've been doing comedy for 2.5 decades. Who in the world is going to take me seriously? So my wife said, do a TEDx. And I said, what's a TEDx? I now have 13 of them. And I got an application that week from a TEDx in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, Collingwood, something. It's a
Yeah,
neighborhood.
yeah.
Yeah, in Vancouver. Love the light rail, by the way. Lord, um, yeah, yeah. Oregon's a lot like Canada, only more guns, worse health insurance. Um, the I auditioned and I got it. And then 2 other events called and said, "Do you have any more mental health topics?" So that was number 2, number 3. And I became a suicide prevention speaker. And the theme of my first TEDx and the theme of my speaking career is
Mhm.
starting the conversation on suicide. Because what I discovered when I was putting the speech together was even though one person dies by suicide in the US every 9 minutes, worldwide every 40 seconds, hardly anybody talks about it unless you bring it up. And then, dear Lord, almost everybody has a story. So that's
Mhm.
how I got started as a suicide prevention speaker. And then, as we say in the U.S., I picked that lane to speak. Meeting planners like the expert or thought leader. Just speak on one thing and do it really well. And
Mhm.
then I thought, well, I'm going to pick a handful of people who industries that have a really bad problem. Construction being number one. So I picked the top 10 industries in the U.S. and pretty much around the world
Mhm.
suicide, and I just market to them. I just booked one this week for a large um, electrical contracting association.
Mhm.
They had seen me at another event in Phoenix for another large electrical contract. In construction, 1,000 people last year died by accident. 5,000 died by suicide.
Wow.
Yeah, you're 5 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off. So that's real. I mean, they're leading the league, sadly. So
Wow.
that's how I and oftentimes I get booked. They want the teaching, they want the learning objectives, teach them something. They want the lived experience, which I've got plenty of. And the fact that I can do it with some funny personal anecdotes to kind of it's a tough topic.
Yeah.
Makes it more digestible, more memorable. Uh,
Mhm.
that's how I got to be the mental health comedian.
Right. Well, I mean, humor is gives a little bit of that gap, right? When I mean, you may actually be funny, but people
Oh,
who
yes,
are,
Lord, yes.
but some people aren't funny,
Mhm.
but if they use humor, it sort of helps them separate themselves from really the actual pain they're in, right? Because you can
Mhm.
say things, it's almost like a distancing possibility, right? And
Yes,
I
and
think, hmm,
distance is often the key. There's a rule in comedy. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. And
tragedy plus time. Okay.
comedy, yes. And the longer you do comedy, the shorter the time between what's happening and the punchline. I'm telling you, I had a heart, I had a heart attack. I've had health problems all my life. Heart problems. I inherited a cholesterol level from my mom of a deep fat fryer, and my dad had a bad heart valve, and I inherited all that.
Mm,
And I had a heart attack in the woods with the dogs by myself. I had my cell phone, but I had T-Mobile, so I didn't have service. And I had to walk half mile of the car, drive 2 miles home, and take a 25-minute ride to the hospital. Well,
mm,
comedian's job is to make people comfortable. That's
right.
basically, that's why I struggle with sales, because in sales, you have to make somebody uncomfortable where they are and then show them how your product will restore
Mm,
the comfort.
exactly. Yeah.
I make me feel uncomfortable. I just, wait a minute, here's a tip, by the way. If you arrive at the hospital with heart attack symptoms, no waiting. I've told you, I told you, look, if you break your nose and you go to the emergency room, there's a long line. When they ask you what's wrong, you say this, I broke my nose and I think I'm having a heart attack. No waiting. So I'm back in my little triage unit with a nurse, and you could tell she's nervous because I'm having a rather large heart attack.
Mhm.
I wanted to be comfortable. So she said, Frank, no paperwork, but I have to ask you a personal question. And I said through my pain, uh, honey, I'm married, but I love the way you think. And she starts laughing. She goes, no, 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 no. Your full name is Frank Marshall King III, but what do you like to be called? Through the pain, I said, Big Daddy. So to this day, 14 years later, 15 years later, when I go back to Oregon Heart and Vascular and see somebody from that morning, hey, Big Daddy. So, but I just wanted to make her, and I'm literally having a heart attack and writing comedy at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I thought to myself, I'm having a good show. My second thought was, well, I better. This one may be my last. Again, writing comedy, having a heart attack. So,
Mhm, mhm, mm. Wow. Well, I mean, it's really like a passion lived in the way you perceive life, right?
yes.
It's it's everything can be seen with a sense of humor.
Yeah, people have asked me, tell me about yourself. I go, well, I'm a comedian. And they go, no, 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 not what you do, who you are. Well, at the risk of being redundant,
Just-
every fiber of my being, I can teach you to write comedy. I can teach you to perform it. I cannot teach you to process the incoming information the way my brain does. It's just, and I believe that my imagination, um, comedic ability, and so forth is simply the flip side of my depression and thoughts of suicide. Same brain, same wiring. How,
Right.
how could it be any other way?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you that because it is the flip side. If you look at it, if you see the world, from a depressive perspective
Hmm?
or doom or suicidal or this is my last day, it is the flip side of that humor that takes any potential tragedy and just makes it lighter, right? It really is the same brain. It feels like to me, at least. I mean, I don't know. I don't have that much experience with suicidal people in my clinic or when I was in clinic, um,
Hmm?
but I certainly know of many people who that's the way they went.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like, but you're living it in a comedy, and because you're teaching it, is that the what drives you forward that you haven't committed suicide at this stage?
Well,
I guess that's the question.
yeah, when I speak, I have two mental illnesses. One is called major depressive disorder, and the other is chronic suicidal intensity,
Ideation.
ideation or intensity.
Yeah.
And every time I speak, I talk about chronic suicidal ideation. And I've met therapists of 20 years who, when I say chronic suicidal ideation, they stare at me like a pig staring at a wristwatch. They have no idea what I'm talking about. because it's not in the DSM-5. So I tell the story of my chronic suicidal ideation. I say to the audience, look, here's what it's like. For me and my tribe, suicide is always an option on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, a couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had three thoughts unbidden. One, get it fixed. Two, buy a new. And three, I could just kill myself.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
I know it sounds weird, but, and then almost every time I've spoken, there's been somebody in the audience who has chronic suicidal ideation. They have no idea it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and all alone. I've had a number of people come up to me crying so hard they couldn't speak. I was at a dental convention. A dentist came. Everybody was leaving the room except this dentist woman walking toward me, and I can see she's crying. When she gets to me, she's crying so hard she can't speak. So I
Mm,
said, "You have chronic suicidal ideation." She nodded. Yes. You didn't know it had a name. Nod. Yes. You thought you were just a freak. Yes. I said, "Well, when you get back home, do you have a therapist?" Nod. Yes. Tell them everything you learned today. And for goodness sakes, tell them you Googled it. Don't tell them you learned it from a comedian. And I got an email a week later. Frank, I think I was at that dental conference in large part simply to meet you. You've changed my life. And I
mm,
can't say that about a lot of people. And that happened over and over and over.
mm,
And one time I was in Montana, University of Montana Billings, finished the show, standing outside, it's wintertime, waiting for the young man to come with his truck to take me to the hotel. And so picture this, it's winter, it's dusk, starting to snow, and there's a river nearby. Dusk, snow, river. And I thought to myself, oh Lord, I am George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what these people's lives would be like if I weren't there simply to tell my story and listen to theirs. And I can't kill myself, otherwise I'd take a lot of those people with me. So I'm stuck
uh,
because I can't. A friend of mine said, you can't live with that. I go, no, you missed the point. I can't die with that.
right,
Knowing that I could have helped somebody. It's very therapeutic. My goal is to save a life a day.
right, right.
And every now and then I hear back. I did a military base in the U.S., Fort Irwin, in outside of Barstow, California. They did a survey, anonymous. 30% of the soldiers said in the last year they'd thought about suicide. So they brought me in. And I met the base psychologist, did his podcast. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call from him. He said, Frank, I had a soldier walk into my office this morning and flat out say to me, I'm depressed and suicidal, and I'm here because Frank King said I had to tell somebody. Boom.
Mm,
Yeah, it chokes me up just to tell the story. But that's what's in it for me. That's the ROI.
mhm,
Very therapeutic for me, knowing that you can make
right.
that kind of difference.
And what do you feel? Because it's bound to be a different understanding than what psychiatrists or psychologists might believe to be the case. But what do you think makes the difference for a person who has either suicidal ideation or, feels like on the verge or they're considering it
Makes a difference. How?
in their decision to stay? What
Yes.
do what do you think that the switch is? Because it feels like a switch almost.
Yes. Well, when
Mhm.
someone decides to end their life, oftentimes it happens within an hour, sometimes within 10 minutes. Now, if they survive the chances of them attempting again are very low.
Mhm.
My depression is not situational. I've been most depressed some of the best times in my life. And
Mhm.
my depression isn't actually connected. The two illnesses are not actually connected, the depression and the chronic suicidal
Right.
ideation. Because I've had suicidal ideations when I wasn't depressed.
Right.
And I met somebody, a woman. She goes, "Could I just have the chronic suicidal ideation? I don't think I've got depression." I go, you may be right.
Mhm.
The it's it's a sense of hopelessness. My depression is hopelessness.
Mhm.
And I think it's that why bother? Really
Okay.
dangerous for young people because they tend to think in the immediate. If
Right.
it's not going
Right.
to get any better than this, and I don't think it is, then why bother? And they
Mhm.
end their lives.
Mhm.
If you can interrupt, it's like I'm a co-author on 4 books on men's mental health, and we use the automobile as a metaphor. Automobile accidents aren't generally the result of one thing. It's not just because the road was slick. It's not just because it was nighttime. It's not because it's raining hard and it's cut your visibility. It's those things in a cascade. If you interrupt that cascade, if all of a sudden it clears up and you can see clearly, even though the road's slick and it's nighttime, then you may not have the accident. So
Mhm.
I think suicides are oftentimes a cascade
Mhm.
of things. And if you can interrupt that, and anybody can, you don't have to be a mental health
Mhm.
professional. That's what I tell my audience. Look, the good news is you can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is having a conversation. If you know how, and before we leave, you will know how. So it's yeah. I think if you can interrupt that cascade,
Mhm.
whether simply by saying to somebody, "Are you okay?" There's a
Right.
there's a guy named Kevin Hines,
Mhm.
one of the few survivors of jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he, bipolar disorder, I believe, hears voices. And they told him to kill himself. He's in the Bay Area, San Francisco.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, how do I kill myself in the Bay Area? Well, helpfully, Google has the answer. It
Mhm.
gave him a list of bridges.
Yeah.
And so he found the one that was closest, Golden Gate.
Mhm.
And he went out and got on a bus. And he said to himself, if anybody asks me how I'm doing, anybody,
Mhm.
I will tell them I am suicidal. Please call the police. I'm going to harm myself. Nobody on the bus ride. So he goes onto the bridge, walks out. He's looking over the railing, tap on his shoulder. Uh, it was a woman. She goes, "Excuse me." He thinks, "Thank God." She goes, "We're visiting from Germany. Would you take our picture?" So, being a gentleman, he took their picture, handed back the phone.
Mhm.
As soon as they turned their backs over the rail, he went. But if anybody had just simply said to him, "Are you okay?"
Mhm.
It's that easy
Yeah. Yeah.
to interrupt that cascade and perhaps stop a suicide.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's really putting that gap in like almost a train of consciousness, which isn't fully conscious, but it's
Yeah.
like just one moment of another human being caring or noticing or it's yeah, no, it's a very good point. And I think with humor it's easier to get through than even very seriously. I mean, if you're with the guy on the bridge, I guess humor might not be the right thing, or it could be. Depends on the energy, right? But it's the caring of you know
Yes.
of
Well,
reaching out.
and humor, I think, in the right the during the recession, I needed a good job with benefits, and I always wanted to be a police officer. So I applied with 12 departments in the state of Washington, taking no chances. And I had several oral boards. Well, they said to me, "Frank, what's the connection between comedians and police?" I said, "Well, we are both paid observers. We notice things other people don't. I mean, they see it, but they don't take note. Secondly, when you step on stage, you have to read the crowd. When you're in a squad car and you pull up on an intersection where people are milling about,
Mm,
you got to read the crowd. You got to take the
mm,
temperature and you got to figure out, maybe who's in charge of all these people. And with comedy and with the situation at an intersection, The first thing you say can either escalate the situation or de-escalate the situation. And comedians can think that fast. They can say something that would de-escalate. I was at a gate at the airport and the plane's delayed, mechanical. So everybody around me is grumpy. They may miss a meeting, miss a wedding, who knows, but they're grumpy. Now, I'm standing on our television set. Above me, CNN is on, and you can hear it all over the gate area. The guy standing next to me, because I'm waiting for my opportunity to break the tension. The guy next to me goes, "How do we get this TV turned to Fox News?" in a loud voice, so everybody heard. So I thought that's the opening I was waiting for. I said, "Well, you kill me first." The place explodes. Everybody's laughing. They're still
Yeah.
happy. They're not going anywhere, but it broke
Yeah.
tension. Just one sentence,
Yeah.
the entire group of people that were there. And that's the if you can break that, you know,
Right.
and there's a new protocol, stop, drop, and roll, like the protocol for if you catch fire. You stop
Mhm.
moving,
Right.
you drop, and
Yeah.
you roll. And the idea is that if you're in that storm, if you're that
Yeah.
cascade, you stop and
Mhm.
pause. And you want to
Mhm.
train yourself to A, not make any serious decisions at that moment. B, if you
Mhm.
can, give yourself a day,
Mhm.
24 hours, and then, if you're going to proceed then. But give yourself some space to so not like I said, if somebody decides, oftentimes it's within an hour, sometimes 10 minutes.
Mhm. Yeah.
I had a friend, sadly, who was a cruise director. And the boat docks, one of the passengers who was, you know, a big time cruiser,
Mhm.
lots of points in whatever their club was, complained. Cruise lines are famous for this.
Mhm.
They fired him unceremoniously. No, let's see what you think. Let's hear what they think. Let's, just boom, you're fired. And I'd known him for 10 years. I mean, he knew what I did for a living. So I'm sure if he had he been living with depression, I probably would know it. He was staying on the 10th floor of a building in Miami, and he went over the railing and 10 stories. And I imagine it was the only way. There was no other means for him at that moment than going over the
Yeah.
railing. I think had he paused and you know tried to get a good night's sleep and then make that decision in the morning. And then there's a funny story.
Mhm. Mhm.
I met a guy who was living in New York City, and he was going to go jump off a bridge in New York City. He was really depressed, suicidal. And he's on his way out the door practically, and he hears behind him Monday Night Football. The Jets are playing. So he goes, "Well, the bridge is going to be there tomorrow. I'm going to go watch the Jets game."
Right.
That was enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next day, the thought had passed, and
Yeah.
the bridge is going to be there tomorrow. What's the rush? Well, and a minor funny story. I was in the woods with the dogs post heart attack. Um, and I'm 68 years old at the time. That's last year. And I was thinking about suicide, not the act, but just the topic. And I stopped and I went, wait a minute. I'm 68 years old. Why rush it? How much time have I got left anyway? If I'm 38, okay, we can talk about it. If I'm staring at another 40 years, okay, let's chat about it. But
Mhm.
68?
Mhm.
What's the hurry? Um,
Mhm. I know when our time's almost up, but I just wanted to say right before we started, I brought up this MAIDS thing in Canada,
yeah.
right? Medically assisted AIDS, and or deaths, actually, that's what it is. And how, currently there's more and more legislations making it easier for teenagers without the consent of their parents, for
Mhm.
depressed people, for people who can't economically figure out how to survive in this, difficult at these difficult times. And I was thinking, you know, the whole intention or the what happens in those times is it's all taken very seriously, but there's no gap. There's no like I'm thinking how easy it is to just believe your thoughts if you have the type of empathy that says, well, you can end it, rather
Mhm.
than the type of empathy that says, like, or that brings up a hockey game or something that, you
Yeah.
don't want to miss, right? Like, and I was just thinking, it might be an incredible topic for Canadians if you ever come, or want to do a talk here, because it has, been, it's a very hot topic here because a lot of people have ended their lives that just didn't have another option presented to them. And then there's people who have been suffering and are old enough, they're in their
Yeah.
80s, 90s, whatever, and they've chronically suffered and they really have had enough of this. So I think there's a lot of gray zone, but
Yeah.
it's reaching populations that I think could really use a totally different solution
Yes.
before
And
considering this.
as we talked about in Oregon, right to die, death with dignity. You have to have only a certain amount of time left. The psychiatrist signs off, the physician signs off. And what they discovered was that if given the control, the person who is going to end up dying by suicide, they live longer and better knowing they have the option. And chronic suicidal ideation. I have a friend who has it, and he said to me, Frank, if it weren't for my chronic suicidal ideation, the fact that I'm willing to kill myself at any moment, I probably would have killed myself a long time ago.
Right,
Because
right.
yeah, I have a mortician friend who says I always try to take suicide off the table. I go, no, no, don't take it off the table. Just move it aside. Don't cut off their only exit.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
might end up, you know. So
yeah. But I think it's getting to the bottom of what is the education that is training these people to perform this work. I think that's what has to be revisited, at least here, because I agree. Keep it on the side. I think it's if you anything you say you can't have, people are going to want. So,
yes,
you
absolutely.
know,
Forbidden fruit.
exactly.
Well, and in the 20s, at least here in the US, they went from a model of psychology, psychiatry, where they would try to figure out what was causing all
Mhm,
of this.
mhm, mhm,
And then they went to a medical model
mhm,
where it was more of treat them with psychotropics. And then when insurance got involved, you have to have a diagnosis, which comes with a code. Otherwise, the practitioner doesn't get paid. And so, for example, with ADD and ADHD, the symptoms are very similar to children who have suffered trauma.
mhm,
And they may not have ADD or ADHD. They may be suffering from childhood trauma.
mhm.
So but you're not going to find that out. It's easier just to give them a prescription for Ritalin than it is to dig deep and figure out what's wrong with the child.
Mhm. Exactly. Anyway, our time is up, and I just want to leave you the last words. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and inspiration.
Well, let's leave it on a funny note. Here's how a comedian would close out a podcast. You ready?
Ready?
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends. If you did not enjoy this podcast, well, we hope you have no friends.
All right. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.